Welcome back to another Survivor Worldwide episode. We're covering Survivor South Africa Immunity Island, and we've got a very special guest with us here today. It is Harry the Ice Cream Guy. Harry,
how's it
how are you,
going?
my friend?
Oh,
Good.
keeping busy. It's actually quite exciting at the moment. You've got South African Survivor going to the merge. You got Australian Survivor about to hit our screens again tomorrow night. So yeah, it's a good time to be a Survivor fan. In Perth, we're also just out of lockdown, so that feels pretty good.
Yeah, 100%. And Riley, very special day for you today. It's your birthday, and you get to speak to one of your favorite survivors as well at the same time.
Yeah.
How are you doing,
It
Riley?
is. Yeah,
Happy
I'm doing well.
birthday.
It's a shame that, unlike Harry, I'm still stuck in lockdown, which is a bit of a shame here in New South Wales. But no, yeah, happy to discuss some Survivor on my birthday with the legendary Harry Hills.
Yeah, happy birthday. You just sprung that on me, Chris.
I know. Just last minute.
Birthday, Riley.
Thank you.
I have to keep you on your toes, Harry. I mean, we have to up the ante when we've got a legend of the game. Exactly. So, Harry, you've been watching the show, and I guess this episode specifically is a pretty predictable one, but it does set up quite a few interesting dynamics going into the merge, which we'll definitely get into, and we'll speculate on how things maybe will play out in the next episode. But overall, what has been your feeling sort of the season, and specifically having the season play in the backyard of South Africa?
The season as a whole, I've really liked. I like that it's in South Africa. I like that we're getting to see these different environments because Fiji, I actually don't mind the Fiji landscape that much. I think it worked quite well with Survivor, but at the same time, it's really nice to see different environments play out. So I really like that. And I think LaRue's done a fantastic job with the season. I think the casting is amazing. This cast is one of my favorites from recent any seasons. And I think it's been a combination of people that kind of read things well, and then a combination of other people that are sort of like executing their plans well, other people that are a little bit chaotic, and I think it's all just kind of come into this really nice package. So I'm very excited to see what happens with the merge. You mentioned that it sort of was a bit predictable, but at the same time, I don't mind these episodes, and I think South Africa handles them very well. I don't really personally like being tricked too much by the edit. And I think they sort of brought forward a lot of good ideas without having to resort to that.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I've seen a bit of criticism in certain circles. You can always find criticism, right? If you're successful enough, you're going to get a bit of criticism coming with it, with some people saying that the season has been a bit too predictable and knowing where the votes are going to go and who's going to go out. But that's just normal staple for South Africa and Survivor. I feel like very rarely do we get tricked. And for me personally, I'm similar to you in that sense that I like to see a plan sort of being laid out in front of us, seeing who's the actual plan of who's going to go home, who's the potential opposition plan to go home, and then if there's a decoy. Personally, as someone who loves strategy, I love to see it unfold, and I love to see a plan sort of work out at Tribal Council. It's always nice to get like the 1 or 2 episodes where you're completely blindsided and you can't believe who's going home. But in general, I feel like we're along with the journey, and that Survivor South Africa doesn't rely on gimmicks or tricks to keep people sort of entertained or coming back to watch this show. Now, Riley, looking at this specific episode here, there's a lot happening here in the early stages of it because we see everybody coming back to the camp, and Santonia's just pulled off this idol play, and everybody's impressed by the fact that she did that and that she found it in the wall in the back of the Tribal Council. We didn't really explore this too much last week, but it was quite interesting to see that we didn't have the idol being shown, that where she goes up to the wall that she takes out. We didn't see any of that footage, so maybe they didn't have the footage for us to be able to see that. It was pretty much she already had the idol in her hand. But Santonia throughout this episode is going to remain very cautious, and she doesn't fully trust this alliance of hers that she's with at the moment. What do you think of Santonia's play at this stage, and here in the early stages of the episode, how she's sort of managing the fact that she's sort of been caught out by playing the idol and not trusting her alliance potentially as much going into that vote?
Yeah, well, I think she did recognise that it was the right move to play the idol at that time. I mean, it is always better just to play it and be safe as opposed to going home with it in your pocket. But yeah, she is very, very cautious of where WADA stands at the moment. Obviously, noting their past alliance on the previous tribe with Chappies in that fractured alliance there when Carla went home, and obviously also Tyson and Kiran as well. She's not fully connected with those guys, so she does seem like a little bit of a fourth wheel at the moment. Not exactly sure of where her idol. Where her position stands within the tribe, rather. So look, it's going to be a big test for Santini going forward to see, where she fits into that majority alliance and whether she can make amends with those former Vuna members going forward, given their past their past rivalries there with those blindsides to Carla and Chappies.
Yeah, I found it quite interesting, Harry, that Anella here in the early stages of this episode, when they're sitting at camp there at nighttime, he's sort of saying that if he finds something, he would rather let everybody know opposed to keeping it. And I think he's sort of posturing a little bit because he's going to create this fake advantage that later on becomes a real advantage. The survivor god smiled upon him, but he creates this fake advantage of having the additional vote that he could place at the merge. What have you thought about Anella's play so far in the game and sort of his position at this stage in the game as well?
I think as a whole, I think he's doing quite well. He sort of had a little bit of luck in terms of he's on the right side of the numbers and those numbers are on the other side just saving him repeatedly. And I'm not quite sure about the specific move around sort of like lying around this, especially because numbers like that can get really, really important. If you've got like a really important vote where you need everything sort of in check and it's coming because you've got the merge where potentially on paper it's 6-6. Obviously you've got advantages now that swap that up. But if you're lying to people that are supposed to trust you about like a very, very important thing like that, it's not ideal because either you're going to have to come forward at some point and fix that or you're going to cause drama for yourself. So apart from that, I think playing really, really well. I think he's defended himself very well. Like obviously Wada's sort of had a lot of conflict with him. And I think he's sort of given his position without necessarily sort of pushing back too hard, if that makes sense. So I think he's played as an individual. He's got a few connections. I like where he's at.
Yeah, and also in this episode, we see, because what I like about Anella is he does have a little bit of that Dirty Harry cheekiness, deviousness in him as well, because, he sees that Kian here early on burns a hand on the pot and she messes the rice all over the show. And then he's got this devious little smile that we saw on your face a few times when you did those devious moves as well. And we've also seen him like steal the bars and things like that, the protein bars earlier in the season. So clearly a player that obviously he comes across, he fronts in a certain way to other players where he's almost very loyal and he's got a good gravitas about him, but behind the scenes he does play it up for the cameras at certain points as well, right?
Yeah, like and it's sort of this interesting thing that what a lot of players are going for is this sort of, they're like giving off this persona and then something else behind that. And I think he's got a lot to sort of push with that, because if he's sort of like just a bigger dude, he's called Smash, you might not think he's that smart. If he's adding to that by just giving off this very honest sort of like persona and saying like, look, I'm just going to play a straight up game. And he is sort of being honest with a lot of stuff, then it sort of lends you to have that sneakiness as well. It's been fun watching him have fun. I think that's like one of the best things about Survivor is if people are genuinely having fun, it really like comes across on the screen.
Yeah, 100%. And, having someone in Kian there that sort of messes the rice up there and having to put all of the rice back, and like Kiran sort of notices that every little grain of rice she got and she washed it. How much of an impact does that have on players playing a game where they haven't been fed for 16, 17 days and something like this happens out there? And can you relate to this in any way? Did something similar happen with you guys out on the island?
I felt so bad for her because she literally got every single grain of rice by hand and like washed it. I was just like, what are you doing? There actually is easier ways. Like we actually did have a few times where people drop stuff, like you obviously forget that things are hot, or sometimes you would put your foot in the coals and then like all of a sudden like burn yourself. But we just used to use Nova Paris's hat because it was like this perfect sieve. And so if you ever got anything dirty, you could just put everything into a hat and put it in the ocean, and it would wash it all. So we didn't have too much of that problem. But food is a big issue, and you can get in big trouble if you mess with it. I think on the South African one, it looks like they're potentially fed even less, which means that it would be a big deal. And you saw that with Paul. It just rubbed people the wrong way. Like he could have been easily on the right side of the numbers, but he was eating and people noticed it and got cranky. And it's sort of the same thing with Kian. Like she was having all those snacks to herself and not really reading that that's an opportunity. Like even sort of ignoring like the negative things. Like if you have something and you choose not to share it, like that's a missed opportunity because you could be really building something. Like as soon as you have anything in Survivor, you should be seeing like, what can I get in return for this slight advantage I have? Like, can I make this like more and more of an advantage? So I think that was a missed opportunity by her. But yeah, in our season, I mean, we went and ate in Champions versus Contenders too. Me, Baden, and Luke ate all the rice one night. I'm not sure if people have seen that, but like we stole it all, and we ate like 12 people's worth of rice, and it was like the funnest thing we ever did. But Baden got in massive trouble for that because it got kind of towards the end, and Simon brought it up in like the final jury, like, why did you steal my rice? Because Baden had I think Baden had actually put the blame on some other people as well, like to really just sink the boot in. So you got to watch out. Like food is a big deal. People are cranky.
Yeah, it's like Chris Dixon here in the chat says, #nighttime rice. We did see that on your season on the show, and that was one of the classic episodes. And I was going to say, you know, we see Luke use this quite a lot, even with Ross earlier in the season with the bananas. And then Jericho, I think, was the person that probably Luke may have gotten that idea from, because in his original season, Jericho has the cookies with, with
cookie
the guys at nighttime. Exactly, the Cookie Monster. So I agree, Riley. How much of a misstep is it here for in the early stages for Kian? Because she is in the outs. She knows she's in the outs. And people are already noticing that she's quite selfish. And throughout the day, we see her eating food alone, potentially sitting there in front of the tribe members and things like that. And I mean, you've got Warda even at one point being quite annoyed by that and sort of saying that, you know, does she not have any social skills in regards to that? Why doesn't she walk away and sort of go eat when no one can see her? What did you think of the play here by Kian in the early stages of this episode?
Yeah, in the last episode, she just lost her only alliance member in Dino. So she's on an island of her own completely, having that extra food and eating in front of, I think it was either Wada or Santonina that she was eating in front of, and saying, oh, don't mind me, I'm just going to, eat this in front of you because I don't want crumbs in my bag. Like, that is a massive social faux pas to play. Eating food in front of someone else when you're on your own on the island, you don't have any allies at all. Surely that's going to be something that's going to, at least go some way to creating amends and potentially giving you an inroads somewhere in the tribe, because it just seemed so silly in my mind. I mean, even when I'm in at home, when I've got plenty of food around and I'm eating in front of someone, I'll apologize. But it's just bizarre sitting on an island where everyone's starving and just eating and not even offering any was just, a massive social misplay by her.
And just thinking of like the context of that, because it's like, if you think about it, if you kind of know you're probably next on the chopping block, it's like you're going to get some food in like 2 days anyway. Like, why not just like try and use it? I would be just throwing everything at the wall. Like I would have used that, would have looked for an idol. I'm not saying she didn't, like that she might have looked for an idol and just wasn't shown. But I would have just been doing every single thing. And part of that would be just give up your food. Like if it's worth a shot at the money, like just keep pushing on. Like, the worst that's going to happen is it doesn't work and you eat in 2 days anyway, or like the next day.
Yeah, 100%. And there was a couple of interesting sort of, like, I know she tried to make a case towards Warda and Tyson at the end, but we'll talk about what her pitch was, because I thought that her pitch was an interesting one as well. And I sort of wonder if there could have been a different pivot to what she tried to do there, because clearly it didn't work. And it's obviously easy to say now that we sit here on the outside and we're not in the fishbowl there, and we don't actually understand all of the different dynamics or the different personalities potentially of the people and what they're saying to the camera and confessionals as well. But we'll definitely touch on that later on, but I do want to go over to the Vuna tribe here, because in the early stages, I've been very high on Ranir's game, but I've been trying to not hype him up too much throughout the season, because one of the problems that I have for Ranir at the moment is that even though he technically is playing a very good copybook Survivor game, he's doing everything correctly. As a fan, if he were to go out there and play the game, you'd love to play like Ranir and not be like a Jacob Durham who goes out immediately, or someone that just crashes and burns. But one of the things with Ranir is he's not proven yet for me in enough tribal councils. And I wonder if that's going to come into play when he actually goes to the merge part of this game, because you've got other players like Amy, for instance, and Sean and Nella, people like Tyson and Kiran. There's a lot of players who are battle-hardened by going to tribal council after tribal council. And maybe, Harry, you can speak to that a little bit as someone that's played the game. How much of an effect does that have when you haven't got that experience of actually having to go to tribal council and sort of test your loyalties at certain points in the game?
Yeah. Being like battle hardened is actually really important. Like you want that experience, because the only time you can really count on things is if you've like actually seen it play out. So these people that have kind of gone to things together, they've seen people vote on their side, they've seen them like day in, day out kind of like work with them. That's really, really valuable. So like obviously on paper, you're looking at Renier as someone almost at the top or at the top. But I think he's only been to a couple of actual tribals, hasn't he? Yeah, so you don't really have a chance to actually do that. Saying that, like, I still think it's great. And obviously we can talk about merge, but I think specifically Renier, like, if I'm looking at what he's doing, like, it's all the right things. Because it's like, you look at the tribe he's in, he's already got connections. He's got people he's been with, aligned with since, like, day one. He's got Amy back. And then he still, even with all of that, wants to go to one of the other people in his tribe and go like, let's make an alliance. Like that is what you should be doing. You should be trying to just push relationships everywhere. Like he's got a secret one. He's now got a secret one with Chappies. And Chappies is doing the same thing. He's sort of getting all these pocket alliances. And that's exactly what you should be doing. So I think he's doing everything right with what he's been given. It's yet to be seen whether he will be like a lightning rod for attention. I think there's some other people that have got a bit of a different read, like maybe people looking at Chappies. So at the moment, Chappies might be the lightning rod that gets all the attention. So as long as he can keep that as like a big thing on the side, maybe he stays clear.
Yes, so Fire, 100% agree with you on Renier with the Jeremy baby story, and we'll definitely get into the family part later on. I don't want to get into that now. We'll go in chronological order and talk about that when that comes up a little bit later on. But one of the things here that really stands out for me, Riley, as well with Renier's game here is, like Harry just said, he's continuing to try and create other alliances, and he goes to Chappies. He has this conversation with Chappies, but what I'm really impressed by in the way that he does that is he really plays his own smarts and intelligence in the game down, and he pretends to not really understand that it's a social game, and he says, hey, isn't this game more about being physical? And he's kind of going to Chappies like Chappies is going to be the sensei who's going to teach him how to play this game, but he's a wolf in sheep's clothing at this point. You know, he knows that the social game is important, but Chappies is underestimating Renier's capability in this point, and it's probably the first time this season, because like Chappies plays fast and loose. And I love that in players. Like Chappies has been the player that I've enjoyed probably as a character, him and Santoni, the most this season, just from the sense that they play fast and loose, sloppy at times, but it's entertaining to watch, right? I think Renier could potentially be his downfall if he underestimates him. And it's quite interesting to see how he plays this game. Renier, to me, is coming across like almost if you go back to Amazon and you had Rob C and I believe it was Matt, who was the person that didn't know how to play the game socially. It's almost like he's pretending to be Matt in the Amazon going to Rob C, and Chappies is the Rob C, but he's kind of like, it's actually the reverse in reality, because I think Renier is a very capable player. What have you thought about Renier's game at this stage, Riley, and sort of how he played that conversation off? Because I think that's probably the best example of what we've seen so far of Renier's game and how good he can be at manipulating people in this game.
Yeah, well, in your exit interview with Dino last week, Dino actually mentioned that he didn't realize Renier was a fan of the game at all. He thought he was a recruit and hadn't watched the show. And I think Renier played that off beautifully in his conversation with Chappies there. And he really came across as not knowing, how the game is played, how social and strategic it actually is, thinking it's, maybe more like something like the challenge that's just really physically based. So it's good that Renier is kind of downplaying his position within the tribe toward Chappies and making Chappies perceive as though Renier is a little minion who's going to run all these errands and he can be, trusted completely, and he doesn't have any free thought at all. So I think that's a great play for Renier to really downplay his position in the tribe, because if he comes out of the gate and positions himself as the mastermind, much like we saw with someone like Rob Bantele last season, I think on a season like this, when everyone's playing at that really high level of gameplay, if he comes out of the gate and he's starting to mastermind moves and appear as though he's a massive fan and playing the game really hard, that's going to put a massive target on his back, which is something he doesn't need, given he's already this challenge beast and got all these alliances built around him. So really, I think he's just trying to downplay his threat at all costs at the moment, and also about positioning himself with Chappies as well. That also offers him a potential meat shield to put in front of him when it comes to individual immunity challenges as well. So I think Renier is really playing it well here and trying to downplay his position within the tribe.
Chris Dixon in the chat says that I've got a poster of Chappies on my bedroom wall. Yes, I do, but I'm sending it back to South Africa so that he can sign it for me, please, and give me a signed copy back, because I do love Chappies. I will admit to it. I've been really impressed by just the character of Chappies in the show. And I mean, we could talk a little bit about Chappies in that previous episode as well, Harry, going out there and saving 2 members of his tribe, and then still going back in 3 times after that to take 2 of the, I think, or 3 of the puzzle pieces back out of the water for his tribe. Like, great person, obviously, to go out there and save these people in the water over there and things like that. But this just continues to grow the target on Chappies' head overall. Yeah. And I think that he, to me, screams merge boot at this point. I don't want him to be the merge boot, but I feel like he's this great big player, big edit, but everybody is talking about Chappies. Even in this episode, one of the reasons that Warda doesn't want to work with Chappies moving forward, work with Kian moving forward, is because she believes Chappies is running the show on the other side. It's been interesting to see how people are responding to Chappies, because from what we see on the TV show, he's very lovable, but it does seem like in the game, everybody wants to target him at this point.
Yeah, like I said, it's the lightning rod. And he can still be likable and very enjoyable to have around. And still, once it gets to this part of the game, it becomes difficult. And yeah, I really like all these casts. I think Chappies is one of the most interesting sort of pathways so far, because he's sort of been in a superpower position. He's been blindsided, I think, a couple of times, obviously without going, but blindsided a couple of times with his allies going and then having to work his way back in. Has been a challenge beast. That swimming was just incredible to be able to support an entire tribe. And sometimes without food, the current can just be insane in some of these waters. So I've got a lot of respect for him. I think unless he can pull out something pretty magical, I think he's going to be a lightning rod. I think if Rennie is smart and some of the other players are smart, they'll keep him a bit longer. You try and chip away at a few other people that might go under the radar, and then as soon as you need it, he's like a get out of jail free card. That's what I look at these big players as. When I was sort of playing the first time, you've got Janine and Luke and stuff like that, and they're going to take all the attention, especially once you get to final 8, something like that. They just take all the heat off you, and you just keep them to a very convenient time and then finally let it go. So if I'm other people, I'm looking to get rid of other people other than Chappies and just keep him as this big figurehead. I think he's still got a shot at winning it. He's got other people that he's in with, but he might need some advantages on his side.
What did you think of Harry? Chris is asking, Harry, what do you think of the nude runs that he's been doing so far? And does it remind you of John?
Yeah, quite a bit like John and Lee as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a weird question. Look, it's fun. Like I said before, if people are having fun, I think that's great for the show. People should always sort of embrace their personality, let it come out on the show, have fun with it. It's so much more enjoyable to just see people having a laugh and just enjoying every bit that the game has to offer. And if part of that is nudie runs into the beach, then part of that's nudie runs into the beach.
So for me as a viewer, I think it's quite entertaining to watch. I do understand the question in the sense that in America, I don't think we spoke about this, Riley, before, that I don't think in America we'll see many nude runs going forward, because the social climate in America is so different at the moment, where if you do something like that, I think that it would be very controversial at this point. But I do know that the culture within Australia and South Africa is a little bit different. It is a bit more playful and fun sometimes, where people won't take as much offense to it. My personal opinion is that if someone on the beach tells you, listen, I understand you wanted to have some fun, but I take offense to this, or I don't like that you're doing this on the beach, then maybe you should be conscious of that. But I don't think that there's anybody at this point that has complained about it as of yet. But it does sort of add to his, I guess, the whole Chappies persona in the game at this stage in any case. Now, Riley, this immunity challenge that we go into here, we see Kian very early on mouthing off to the tribe that save me, and Marisha's the one who sees that. But ultimately, the decision is not going to be made to save Kian at this spot. And like Harry said earlier, that Anella's got some friends in high places. So he's got Rainier and probably Amy. I think I heard Amy talk quite a bit in that huddle as well, sort of looking out for him in this spot here specifically. Do you like the move here for Zumba and keeping Anella safe? And what did you think of the immunity challenge as a whole?
Well, I think it's definitely the right move, given that Anella obviously has that connection with Rainier and that majority alliance. And as we were discussing with Harry before, It's all about being battle hardened. Kihan hasn't had any really opportunities to test her alliances with the former Zumba members at all. I mean, really, her only allies, at least from what we've seen so far in the game, have been Sean and Dino, and that relationship with Sean was burnt after that first tribal council. So I'm honestly not surprised at all that they didn't go to save her. I mean, Smash is obviously someone they can see themselves working with deep into the game, and it also creates that sense of distrust with people like Wada, Sumpney, Tyson, and Kiran within the tribe there, because if Smash isn't having the opportunity to vote with them, do they truly know where he stands within their alliance, and is it going to be, something to worry about at the merge? Is he actually going to go to that side instead of yours? So it's I think it adds a little bit of unpredictability for that alliance there, the former Vuna members, to think about, where does Smash truly stand?
Yeah, and I wanted to add here, Harry, that, Australian Survivor for me, when I look at the three shows, I love different things from the US versus the Australian version versus the South African version. And I think that it's great that there is certain points of differentiation that you can point out to, that you can like within these different shows that make you want to come back and watch it. Australian Survivor for me has got the best physical challenges of any of the shows. Like, I think it's way more demanding. They put a lot of effort into it. But this specific challenge for Survivor South Africa looked like it was a pretty big physical challenge as well, and there was a lot of thought that went into it. It was probably one of the biggest challenges that they've sort of put together so far for the season. What did you think of it? Did you sort of like the way that they structured this challenge?
Yeah, it was cool. I like the swimming. I think that swimming is always a cool thing to introduce. It's just like a point of difference, because you can have some people that are conventionally not that strong but really great at swimming. So I think it's always good to have those different strengths shown off. Funnily enough, I've actually done both the puzzles before. The circle puzzle is horrible and really difficult, and it takes a while to actually even get your head around like the best way of doing it. When we were sort of doing it, obviously I didn't even win, but we sort of realized after a while that trying to follow the patterns and the actual thing on it doesn't make a lot of sense. You can really just use the shape of the actual puzzle pieces and you get a little bit quicker, but not quick enough when I was playing. The ladder was also super interesting, because I don't know if it's even really clear to people watching, but the actual puzzle of it isn't the ladder pieces themselves. It's the holes in the ground, and the holes in the ground are all different depths, so that it's not just a simple thing as taking the highest step and putting it in the last pole. It can be different depending on what's actually in the holes, and you can't see anything. It's almost like a guess and check using a little bit of logic as well. So it's a bit of an equalizer, and I really like that challenge. And on top of that, usually the steps are really heavy. Now, something I actually have to go back and watch, but I'm not sure whether the Vuna tribe actually completed the puzzle properly. I think they might have just got it good enough and then just gone up the steps anyway. But I'll have to go back and check. That might be something that's a little bit of a miss.
Yeah, because I didn't pick up on that either. And the other thing with that as well is they've got these massive wooden poles that they need to put in there, and you can see the guys in the Vuna tribe really struggling, and they've got some of the most physical people in their tribe. I mean, you've got Marisha, who's stronger than half of the men, and also all the women. You've got Ranir, you've got Chappies, you've got Sean in there. I really felt for Zumba, because they have the smaller guys in the challenge here, and Tyson and Kiran there. And Anela probably being the biggest physical person in that tribe with a lot of the ladies. So I did feel like it was a little bit lopsided. It was always going to go one way in regards to that. And then all of that also coupled by the whole thing here, Riley, with Santoni sort of having a little bit of a panic attack there in the beginning, not wanting to go out and do the challenge. And I think that, Riley, this really gives us a real good sense for how real the threat was, because me and you were both saying that Chappies put his game to the side to go and what he believed at that point to go and save people. And we had one of the listeners on Twitter comment at me after the show saying that even if there were lifeguards there, that water is so murky that if someone hits their head or they go down under, it would actually be quite a struggle to find them. So I do think that there is a bit of danger in being in that river, and because of the way that water look, you can't really see how strong the current is, because it doesn't have clear water for us as viewers to have a real understanding of how difficult it is to be out there in this challenge. Riley, what did you think of the Santoni sort of thing here? And do you think that this put them back even more so? And also Warda being seen as the person who's helping her here in this challenge to get through it.
I was actually kind of surprised that they went straight back to the water challenge on the next immunity challenge after seeing what happened with Smash and Santini in the last challenge. I would have actually thought they might have actually ditched the water aspect of it and just gone straight for the puzzles. So that was, a multifaceted challenge there with the ladder and with the puzzle at the end as well. So there were lots of different components to it. Seeing how much Santini and Smash struggled in the last episode, but I mean, it's great to see that Santini is so grateful for what Chappies did, regardless of their tribal standings, and that everyone recognised that and were, encouraging of her to, give it her all, really. And Nico, of course, putting up his hand to go save her if she got in any trouble, of course. There,
I was going to ask really if JLP would do that as well, Harry. Do you reckon he'll jump in there and save the cast?
JLP's not getting in the water. He's not messing up his hair. Yeah, I really like that moment. I thought that was like a really good example of South Africa. They usually give all these characters a lot of depth. Like, I like the depth to Water's character. She's like a very imperfect character, but at the end of the day, you see how nice of a person she was being, like supporting Santoni and being that person that went through the water for her. And on top of that, that's the best thing you can do in Survivor. I mean, she's just gone from being perhaps an enemy of Santoni to being one of her number one allies, just from that really nice thing. Like, you've got to look at everything as an opportunity. And in this case, just being a good human was that opportunity. And it was nice that Santoni, like, I like her as a character, like how she just wears her heart on her sleeve and she's like very open and honest about that sort of stuff. So just overall, just really good television.
Yeah, I really loved it. And I think that we were very critical on Warda not being flexible in the previous episode and saying that Warda potentially could be the downfall for all the original Vuna members if they go to emerge, if she's not willing to work with Santoni or Chappies, because I only see one way forward. Yeah, we haven't seen it yet though, but Warda could very easily, I mean, like you said, it was because she did this out of the goodness of her heart. I don't think there was a strategic thinking in helping Santoni, but I think for a person like Santoni, this would mean a lot. And I think that's why Santoni has gravitated towards Chappies, and this relationship between Chappies and Santoni has been so interesting to watch throughout the whole season, is because she sees good in Chappies where other people have been saying he's this macho guy trying to run things and all this kind of thing. I found that to be very interesting, that relationship between them. And I think that Warda did a similar thing here for her, like she would have expected of a Chappies. So I think that that's going to galvanize that bond between those two going forward. And again, all of this could in the next episode go south, but it does look like it's, it looks like there's something forming there.
Yeah, but as an episode, I think out of almost any episode I can think of, this kind of just really put to the forefront that Survivor's a social game. And like, you hear that said actually quite a lot, but like as an actual episode, we've sort of had like the Renier and Chappies interaction where he's trying to trick him about that. You see Kian get voted out pretty much simply because they didn't get that connection. Waters making a connection with Santoni. So it's like, I think as an episode, you can really just see how important that is. Like, above anything else, it's just social game.
Riley, do you want to have a go at that question there?
I think it's too early to say, to be honest. I don't really think she has too much upside at this stage of the game. She's, burnt a lot of those relationships with Chappies and the like. But, I mean, going in the merge, there's the opportunity to, repair those. I mean, I think we're at 13 members left at this point. So there's, plenty of opportunities to
12
obviously fix our standing within the game. So, I don't think at all it's I think it's way too early to say that White is going to be a GOAT that's dragged to the end. I do think that she has plenty of potential to play a big game, and we have seen some glimpses of her, really trying to make moves. Back at the old Funa tribe with Carla, they really worked in conjunction together to, formulate all these blindsides. So I wouldn't rule out White just yet. She's still got that connection with Anesu and Kiran, and I think she does have. There's so much more of the game to be played at this point that I wouldn't rule her out just yet.
Yeah, I wouldn't call her a GOAT regardless, because it's like she's clearly doing what she thinks is best for her game, and like pretty much by definition, she really shouldn't be defined as a GOAT. She might go to the end and get no votes, like you don't know, because like you said, Riley, there's still ages to go. But I still would never call her a GOAT from this stage on, because she's actively a part of her own game.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I kind of am of the camp that believes, and I could be completely wrong because I've never obviously been out there and played the game, but I feel like people have got short-term memory, and that whatever you do after the merge in general is where people really start paying attention to who's playing the best game, unless you've had a really, really big game and you've taken up some really, really big threats early in the game that sort of makes it all the way through until the end. I think that a lot of people remember the sort of post-merge phase of the game a lot more when you get to the end of the game. And I could be wrong here, Harry. Do you agree with that, or do you think it's very situational, obviously, depending on who's in the game?
I look at everything. I think everything in Survivor is just context. Everyone's going to have different reasons for giving their jury vote, and I think you just have to accept that that's the case when you're a player and really need to just try and appeal to what's in front of you. So I'm sure there's people out there that do have short-term memory. Personally, I try to look at everything, but there's obviously when the stakes are higher, that makes a bigger move. So like when the stakes are high near the end of the game, obviously people are going to look at that and look at that quite a lot when you're thinking of a winner. Yeah.
So the reward here was a really great one because, again, we get to see a lot more about people and their families and how they interact. And Renier had a really long post on his Instagram, which I'm not going to open up and bore you guys and read through it, but it was actually really well put together, where he talks about the fact that as a fan, he never really used to understand why the survivors get so emotional when they're out there and seeing their loved ones, because it's only for like a couple of weeks that you're gone. And I think I'm guilty. I've been guilty of it a few times myself, where I'm like, hey, I'm not an emotional person. I won't get emotional if I'm out there and this happens, but you really are away from all of your loved ones. You're leaving people behind, and you don't have a phone. You don't have any of the normal things that we kind of take for granted, that we look at our phone 20 or 30 times a day, right? And you don't have that instant contact with people. And then you've also got a bunch of people there that are coming for you, and you're fighting for your life in the game. And no one really fully that you can trust, or you know that these people, they're friends with you, but they're friends with you for your vote. These people are people outside of the game that want nothing from you. And I guess, Harry, as someone that's gone through this experience, give us a little bit more of an insight of what it feels like to actually be out there and get something from your loved ones when you've been playing a game such as this.
Yeah, it's so funny because it's like you always think you're like, oh, it's so silly. Like, what are they doing? They're like embarrassing themselves. It's so emotional. And like, I'm not known as a very emotional person. Like, I wouldn't like cry on a regular basis, like, or get emotional like that in my regular life. And then it's like day 29, call my fiance and broke down crying in like 5 seconds. And it's just everything culminating together. You're going through a hard experience. You don't have anyone to rely on. And so when you actually hear that voice or see their face, it's like, it's a big deal. Like, because it's actually, everything comes kind of like flooding back at once and your brain breaks and you just start crying. I was actually surprised more people didn't cry, to be honest. Because it's a hugely emotional thing to have that all taken away from you, like any form of emotional comfort, and then get it given back. It's a big deal.
Yeah, and I also think that add to the fact that this survivor group had a very unique scenario where when they went to go play this game, South Africa still had a pretty severe case of COVID going on at that time, and there were certain parts of the country that were in lockdown or there was isolation. So there's a lot of fears just on how your family is doing outside of the game for people like Renier and Chappies who've got partners at home that are pregnant, that potentially are more vulnerable and things like that. So, obviously South Africa at times can be a pretty violent country at times as well. Like, so it's another thing to think about. Obviously, our thoughts go out to everything that's been going on in South Africa over this last week with the rioting and the looting, and we hope everybody's okay. I know that there's a couple of previous players that live in some of these locations that's been hit pretty hard. So our thoughts and prayers go out to all of these people, and we know South Africa will get it back in check. But those are the things that are back, sort of in the back of your mind when you're playing a game such as this, where you just don't know how your people are doing outside of the game, and you're out there doing, like Chappie said, what is a bit of a selfish move in some ways, because you do it for yourself. But Riley, who were you the most surprised by, I guess, when it came to sort of learning a bit more about their families and seeing a bit of the background? I've got a definite person that I've been sort of calling on the show. I think that this person's playing probably a very good game. We just don't see a lot of it. But a person that I think might go to the end and not get any votes. I was pretty surprised by their response to their family thing. But who are you the most surprised by, I guess, sort of by having a look at these videos?
Yeah, well, obviously, Renier and Chappies both expecting children back home, kind of the anti-Oscar situation, in that they both have, children on the way there. So, and it's interesting, though, and we'll discuss this later, that they're not revealing that as part of their game because they might view it as being a potential target on their back. But someone that really shocked me. It's always nice to see, players get really emotional that you would normally think are, very strong. And for me, that was Sean. Sean really, broke down upon seeing his family. And I imagine, given the uncertainty at the moment with COVID in South Africa, which has especially been hardly hit, very hard by the situation. Just for them to see those family members and connect. It's so great to see them really break down. And Marisha's husband as well, breaking down as well. That was nice to see. So always nice to see who everyone is playing for, and actually get an idea of what their stakes are for playing the game.
Yeah, it's interesting. As a South African, we call them Boersians when they're out on the farm. It's farmers, and you don't see a Boersian cry very often. You don't see someone like that show the emotion. So for me as well, it was kind of interesting to see this hardcore farmer breaking down a little bit as well, and just seeing the love that he has for Marisha in the game. And it gives us another insight into Marisha, because she's been this challenge beast and very dominant in the game, but we haven't actually seen a lot of personal content from her. And Sean was the one for me as well, Harry, where I felt like he's been very abrasive at times, and I know he's a nice guy because I follow him on his socials and all that stuff, but he's playing a game that he's hungry, he's trying to get his way, and he can be quite confrontational in certain situations, but I know he's a good guy. And
it's the classic one. He's the one day one where it's like, oh, I'm gonna cut everyone's throat, and then there's just a sweetheart underneath.
Exactly. And I mean, hearing the story about his mom and the fact that he's playing for her and sort of that she was left with nothing when his dad left and all that kind of stuff, that makes you want to shout for Sean even more, and you want to get behind him. So I hope he does go deep into the game moving forward. I'm worried for Sean just based on the edit. I wish I could turn my fan brain off, and I can't. I just don't see how he gets to the end and wins. But I want to have a good experience.
You can't in South Africa anymore, can you? Because it's just that you can't even look into the edit because something might just come up out of nowhere. I think we're all kind of still using our US Survivor brains with the edit to try and work things out. But you never know, because I've been surprised by every season so far.
Yes, no, you're right. I mean, for me personally, last season wasn't a surprise. I felt like last season was pretty predictable with Rob Bentelli sort of running the game from beginning to end. And I picked up on that pretty early on, but there were the hope of someone like a Jark Burger potentially upsetting the apple cart, but he just never had that social capital. But the season before that, very unpredictable. The season before that, not so predictable as well. So you're right. I think we're still trying to get used to how South Africa edits a show. And I won't go too much into the edit because in my mind, using my US fan, Australian fan type of edit thing, I think there's about 5 players potentially still in it to win it, but I could be completely wrong and there could be a lot more players. The fact that there is still 5 players to potentially win it makes it exciting though. I don't think it's as clear and cut where you can say, oh yeah, Renee's definitely winning it or Tyson's definitely winning it. I do think that there is a few players outside of those two and both sides of the coin that could still go on to actually win this thing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in my mind, I'm looking at the merge and I'm thinking it's extremely exciting. I could see a lot of people going far. You've got people under the radar. You've got Anesu. She's got a pretty great story. You've got a lot of people in the majority alliance who, Renee's probably going to use Chappies as his shield. And then you've got all these other people probably going to use Renier as their shield. You've got Amy, Nicole, you've got Marisha, and they're all playing a good game. It's very solid. All that it would take is a good post-merge to just get them those extra few little things on a resume, and boom, you're a winner of Survivor.
100%. And one of the things that sort of Riley mentioned that really stood out for me was the fact that we get Chappies and Renier both having the same backstory. So in my mind, I'm wondering, does that become a bigger thing down the line if they find out that they both are there for the same reason, or potentially if there is a finale? Because I think that Renier not wanting to let them know, he's the one who vocalized, I don't want people to know this so that they use it against me. If Renier or Chappies get to the end and they sort of say, hey, I had to leave my pregnant wife, do they automatically get the vote of the other person potentially? It's potentially very powerful. I don't know if they get there together. They could. But I think it's sort of leaving us into a very intriguing storyline going into the post-merge section here, and it'll be interesting to see how that's going to play out moving forward. I also want to touch on Immunity Island here briefly before we start getting into the strategizing prior to the Tribal Council. We've got Anela Smash who goes to Immunity Island. He obviously is going to choose to stay and play, but in this case, he also doesn't actually get any cross against them, which is great to see. I guess just before the merge, it sort of promotes promotes him to go and take the chance. I think he would have done it regardless. And he gets the same meal, the same feast that the same Mexican fiesta that there is, which is a massive thing. And then also his brother coming on there and sort of telling him to look behind him. And it was quite a funny moment seeing him think, oh, maybe my brother is here. But then realizing there's a scavenger hunt afoot, and he goes and he finds this, I believe it's called tribal insurance or something like that, but it's basically the +1 vote that you can steal from someone else, or steal a vote, I guess, from one other person. Great play by Anela to go there and do it. Harry, what have you thought of the theme of Immunity Island as a whole this season up to date? Do you like the way that they've done this?
Yeah, I love Immunity Island for a couple of reasons. I think that we've almost stumbled, or the players have almost stumbled upon a way to kind of break that as a concept. But at the start, especially, fantastic for keeping people that are like obviously on the bottom. You can kind of keep them in the show, really mix things up. The fact that we've had quite a few tribe swaps as well to actually mix things through, make it a real difficult actual moral choice. Whenever you win, you kind of have to debate that with other people. They're probably talking about it back at camp as well. We haven't really seen a lot about that. But I think it's a really, really interesting choice. I like the fact that there's just a lot of choices involved along the way. That's the most interesting stuff about any kind of twist, any kind of advantage, is more just about the choice. Like, how is it going to be used? Will it be used? And so like episodes like Carla having the balls to basically just come back and just not use it, even though her head was on the choke block, like, that was amazing. Like the fact that she came back, she's like, no, I'm coming back. Like, I'm using my vote. I'm going to vote this person out. Like, that's awesome. And to have her sort of solidify with Wada, that's a really nice personal moment as well. I really enjoyed that. And to see other people, we've had all sorts. We've had people come back, we've had people fail, win. So I love it as a concept. I think the players have almost worked out how to break it. If I was in a season, I probably would have worked out how to break it. You can easily just have one player on one tribe say that they'll forfeit the contest every single time in exchange for the other tribe sending them to immunity, which is the one thing that's probably wrong with it. Yeah, I mean, if you're a Nelly, you could just...
You're like Teriso. Like, if you were Teriso early in the game where everybody was going for Teriso all the time, like, Teriso could have just stood up and said, listen, I will do my best to throw it every single time. You guys just keep me safe, and as soon as we get into a tribe or a tribe swap down the line, I'll work with you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you're right. There's other ways to work it. One thing I do feel like it's a missed opportunity. I do feel it's like a missed opportunity potentially with having two people go to Immunity Island a little bit more often, because I really enjoyed the Tocantins Exile Island twist where they had different people from different tribes going to Exile Island at the same time, because again, it forms those extra bonds and potential to get cross-tribal alliances going, and it just muddies the water a little bit further, I guess, down the line. So it's something, if they continue to use this kind of theme in the future, I'd like to see them explore a little bit with that type of thing a little bit more.
Yeah, there's always ways to like mix it up. I think it's a really good core concept. And then you can just play with a few things more. I liked the scavenger hunt as well, but I think a scavenger hunt you could probably make way more difficult so that it can't be completed in the one go. That's the only thing I think I was really disappointed with that, is it would be great to see it not go to completion, and then Anela all of a sudden has a choice of, if someone else goes back that's in his alliance, does he share that clue for them to continue the scavenger hunt or something like that? But I love scavenger hunt. I love finding things. That's like a fun part of the game. But at the same time, yeah, I would have loved to see it go over multiple things, because then we can enjoy more hunting.
Yeah, so we're going to finally get back into Zamba, and we're going to talk about the dynamics prior to the tribal council here. A lot of what we see at this stage is actually from Tyson in regards to verbalizing the fact that they are down in numbers, and if they were to go to a merge, they would potentially struggle against the original Zamba members who are now Vuna 2.0 or 3.0. Kind of lost track, so I guess to say original would be easier. But the original Zamba members, they need to take one of them out, and they only had an option between taking Anela Anela or Kian out in this spot. And because Anela is now on Immunity Island, the obvious choice becomes Kian as the person that we need to target here in this spot. I actually want to go to you, Riley. Riley, you were sort of critical of Tyson's move last week to go against Dino, and you thought that there was potential to work with Dino and that original Zumba members a little bit more going into the merge potentially, and that could provide some safety to Tyson. After watching this episode and sort of the strategy unfold for this specific episode, are you still as critical on this move, or do you sort of start seeing a little bit of validity in the strategy that Tyson is sort of deploying here and minimizing the numbers and equaling it back out going into the merge?
Yeah, so my main criticism with the whole Dino blind side was that it appeared that if the merge was to come in, say, the next 1 or 2 episodes, as it is now, that original Zumba Alliance is going to be running the merge. From what we're seeing, Renier and Amy look like they're in the dominant position right now, and they're going to really dominate when it comes to the merge. But for Santini and Wilder now to cast those dispersions they have aside and actually come together and appear united, that might be a strength for Boona if they can pick up Enesu and Chappies and maybe bring someone in that's on the outsides of the original Zumba Alliance. Perhaps that's someone like Smash. I'm not sure who else they'd be able to bring in, but it's going to be interesting to see now that Kihan's gone and headed into the merge. How are these this Boona 4 going to get the numbers to potentially position themselves in a power position? Obviously, Tyson has the idol in his pocket. We now know that Anela has this extra vote he can use at the merge. Also, got to factor in that he also has a no vote at the next tribal council. But I think that, yeah, getting rid of Kihan at this point, probably the better move now that you got rid of Dino, and it's going to solidify this Boona strong alliance going into the merge now.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting to see Tyson sort of play the game at the moment, because I do feel like for quite a while in the early part of the season, he never really had the opportunity to play the game because he was constantly on the outs. He only had that original Vuna tribe where he looked like he was kind of in the middle of where the different alliances were forming around him. But then when he got into that first swap tribe, his whole story has been, I need to survive Vuna 2.0. I need to be able to use my idol, get swapped into another tribe of players that I can play with. And luckily for him, it's happened in such a way where he did land on Zumba 3.0 with a lot of the original Vuna members there with him as well, which has now allowed for him to take a lot more control of the game and the strategy and the way that he wants to play it. And I do think that for him to look at this, that Zumba tribe, and he's been there, he's lived with them for at least 9 days, right? So he knows how close Renier, Marisha, Nicole, all of those guys are working together. And he's also hearing from Warda that Amy and Sean and Anela were very close together. I think that he's doing the right thing at this point to try and get the numbers back together. The really big fear that I have for Tyson, Harry, is will he be able to get Santoni and Chappies to work with Warda? Can they mend that bridge? And that's going to be the real key question here going into the merge.
I have to say sorry as well, because I think there's construction going on like in the wall. But yeah, super interesting. And I think it's starting to like blend into the merge kind of strategies. I think Tyson has played well. Like he's sort of gotten through things. He's been himself, and he's like really worked to his strengths. And he got through the things he needed to. It's a really interesting situation because it sort of seemed like Kian was the one person that had the correct read. Like she was sort of like really worried about this big majority, and the others are like, no, like we think Chappies is in control, and like maybe we can bring it back, that sort of thing, especially with a Santoni connection. I'm very worried for Tyson. I think unless things can fall his way, like he's going to have to really work. I think things can go badly because if you've got Chappies making connection with the majority and then Santoni going back up with him, who should be able to tell them that Tyson has an idol, it's going to get very hairy. If I'm on that majority, like Tyson would be the one I'd target straight away. It would be Tyson and Kieran.
100%.
Which is bad for me, because I really like them.
Yeah, I like them both as well. And for me, if I look at Tyson and Kiran, Tyson to me becomes the more dangerous one of the two because he's able to find idols. The fact that he's got a second idol now, the fact that Santoni knows he's got an idol, And Santoni is not fully in with that tribe as of yet, because she keeps saying that, as long as I'm the fourth person, I'm the fourth tag along, then I'm going to keep my options open. And Kian correctly reads that, and she says in the confessional that Santoni is only going to be loyal to an end. She's only loyal because at the moment it's going to keep her off the block. But as soon as she gets back to Chappies, that's where her heart is, and she'll want to play with Chappies. So wherever Chappies goes, potentially is where Santoni is going to go. And I think that sort of staying on Tyson specifically at this point, I'm very fearful for him as well. I do think that Tyson is someone that has got a really good read on the game. I just don't know. He's quite, he's got that real calm presence about him. I haven't seen his social game, and I know his social game is sometimes very hard to show on the TV show. I haven't seen it in play enough with a Tyson, with a Chappies, or with some of the other players. I think we saw it a little bit with Renier, him going, but I think that's more a bonus to Renier, the fact that he went to Renier to tell him he had an idol. So maybe that relationship comes back into play at some point, because Tyson is someone that I do still see in my top 5 as someone that can win this game. I just don't see how he gets there, but the edit around Tyson has been good, because his reads constantly have been pretty correct, because he's been in control of votes at certain times. He's been able to drive where the strategy has gone. And again, in this episode, we see things like Tyson going out on the beach, for instance, Riley, and collecting crabs, taking it back to the tribe. Tyson getting crabs is not the best thing to say, like he mentions to his tribe, but he goes out there and he provides some food to everybody, and he's a bit of a provider. He's clearly someone that's really loved. And I do wonder, Riley, because Kiran is another person to me that is, I think, a very under-edited player in this game, and I think he's very smart. But why is Tyson getting all the credit at this point, Riley? Why do you think we're seeing that? I mean, for me, I feel like Tyson, there's more to give with him in this season.
Yeah, I don't think Tyson's getting the social credit he deserves. And mainly part of that is because he's really fallen behind Kiran on this new tribe. And also Inesu being, two of the stronger social players in terms of building all these bonds. And really, they brought him into their alliance with Wada. And it seemed that Inesu and Kiran for a long time were the ones running that ship over on Vuna. But now that Tyson has, the power of finding all these idols, he does have this potential to, dictate the vote. We saw in the Day No Blindside, though, that was mainly Tyson's doing. So it does seem like he has a lot of sway there. And perhaps most of that is because he has the idol in his pocket. But yeah, I'd like to see more of Tyson's social game at the merge. But I think given his position, and now that we've seen Chappies and Renier coming together, and if that alliance is to stick, I do worry for, the old Vuna's position within the game and how they get out of this, because we haven't seen too much from Manesu on the new Vuna tribe. So I'm worried to see how she goes post-merge. Does she have any alliances she's built on that new Vuna tribe, or is she just going to be going back to the old Vuna tribe? And noting that Chappies is, sort of straying away from that alliance at the moment. Are we going to see this Vuna 4 get knocked off? It's going to be really interesting to see when we actually get to the merge, to see, how the numbers fall out and which advantages actually come into play. Obviously, lots of advantages with Inesu, Anela, and Tyson at this point, and it's going to be, really interesting to see when they're used and how they're used.
I think it's going to be interesting as well, because that first one is super important, and you've got 6 and 6, and they're not necessarily sure. I mean, like when we're watching a TV show, we really get all that extra stuff. You get the extra little confessionals, but on top of that, I think a big thing is that you have irrelevant conversations just pushed out the way, which you don't have as a Survivor player. You just have all these events to kind of base your opinions on. And so if it's 6 and 6, if I'm Smash, I'm playing my advantage straight away, because it's 6 and 6. And with the votes the way they are, the original Zamba members do not need anyone. If they all stick together, he uses a stealer vote, they don't need anything. But the second that he plays it, it's probably going to put people on edge. You're going to see idols come out. You're possibly going to see Anessa use her advantage as well. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how it actually falls. And then I think if we're talking about merge in general, I think there's one big, big wild card. And it was just this tiny moment. It was the tribal where everyone's there and you've got Nicole saying cheers to everyone. And like,
nice.
that's the split second thing for her to just be like, oh, like cheers. And Santoni literally called her nemesis in this game. And I'm wondering whether that's going to come back, because that could be a huge thing in pulling Santoni away from this majority, and you could potentially see Renier look at this trio of women as a threat and maybe move with Chappies, move with Santoni, something like that, form his own little group. So there could be a very predictable merge, but I'm thinking that it might get a bit crazy.
Yeah, and another thing that I want to give Tyson and Kiran a lot of credit for, it's quite subtle, but I'm sure, right, Harry, you'll appreciate this as someone that's been out there and have played the game, is that I feel like not many people have been able to deal with Santoni being paranoid at certain times within the game, but I feel like Kiran and Tyson have got a hold on it, because we see in this episode, she gets really paranoid, she's really vulnerable about the fact that she could potentially be going home, and I think that it's very difficult to keep a paranoid person in check and keep them voting with you, but so far, it does look like Kiran and Tyson have got a hold on that.
Yeah, I love, like, they're both very, very calm, which is so valuable. Like, that's something that I kind of prided myself on doing a lot of the time, is just being very calm, bringing forward stuff, because other people are drawn to that. And I think that's what a lot of this cast has in spades, is just a lot of calmness that they bring. And everyone wants to work with that. Everyone wants a calm player that they don't think is going to go crazy and do weird stuff on them. They just want it to be nice and predictable. And Kieran especially has had this amazing ability to really push those social skills. But Tyson as well, like, he comes across super chill. Like, you can have that conversation. And the cool thing that I like about Tyson is he can disagree with you, but it's still this very calm, controlled conversation. Like, that, he very clearly immediately disagreed with everything Santoni was saying, but he's like, look, no, like, we're on your side. And then Kieran sort of had the forethought as well to he threw some other line in there. I forgot what it was. It was something about, like, the Mexican feast, like, she's going to have to bribe me with that. And it's like, that seems like nothing, but that's actually a nice little thing that to put in Santoni's head, that, like, you know, it's going to have to be literal bribing for me to vote you out.
Yeah, she doesn't have the food. She doesn't have the Mexican fiesta there on the beach to be able to offer me to stay in the game. That was brilliant.
Yeah.
And I do, you know, again, I want to touch, I think Tyson and Kiran, personally, I feel like they played their hand well here. I do think they're making all of the right moves going into the merge, because I do think that bigger alliance needs to be broken down going into the merge, and they seem like they're going to be sticking together. The part here that's interesting is Kian having the conversation with Warada just prior to Tribal Council, trying to make the pitch that, listen, if you vote me out, then Santoni is going to jump back over to Chappies. That's going to happen. And that's very good, having that conversation with Warada directly, because Warada has got a big issue with Chappies, or is seen to have a big issue with Chappies up until this point. So that's kind of hitting on a sensitive spot there for Warada. But the interesting thing is that she's trying to convince Warada that Warada, Tyson and Kiran, the three of them, should come over with her to join the alliance of Renier, Marisha, and Nicole. And Warada's read here, I mean, give her credit. She's been under-edited at certain points in the season, but her read here is that I don't know those people on the other end, but I do know some of those players like Amy and Sean that potentially wouldn't want to work with me, and they're also pretty close with them as well, with Renier as well. So there's players that I don't know, and I just feel like Kian, she tried to make a good case here to have that strong 8, but I also think Warada's read is correctly in the sense that she just, and also the fact that it didn't help that she said, you know, Kian is a very selfish person in the game, not obviously in life, guys, but in the game, she didn't share food. So I think, again, it just shows you how important these little things are when it is about playing the game, and that you're socially aware of how you're coming across to other people, and that your actions don't put them off even prior to making the pitch, because Kian really had an uphill battle to fight here, but at least give her credit for trying in this spot, right, Harry?
Yeah, like I thought it was the perfect case of someone that has a good read, understands the strategy, but just does not have social capital to pull it off. Like, she had the correct read on the other side. She had, I think, like a good portion of the read of everything correct. And she had a decent pitch. She picked the right person. It's just all these things all done correctly, but she just didn't have social capital. And I sort of look at it in terms of, like, social game is kind of like building up a bank account, and strategy is spending it. And if you're doing that, like, she had a bank account that was overdrawn, and she wanted to buy something, and, like, it just wasn't happening. And all the ideas were right, but if you've got someone that just isn't really into you, then they're not going to do it. Like, I've seen people make dumb moves simply because they like or dislike someone. Happens all the time.
Now, Riley, we go here into the tribal council, and it's pretty straightforward. I mean, Kian immediately knows prior to the voting that she's probably going to go home, and it was quite an interesting strategy because I do feel like at this point she was kind of still defending Warda's point of view quite a bit against Anella, and she was painting a bit of a target on Anella, but Anella was never really going to go anywhere in the spot because he's got the immunity idol that he's coming with from the immunity island. So a bit of an interesting sort of dynamic there between them. What did you think of the potential rift here between Anella and Warda, and do you think that that's something that's going to be fixable going into a merge at all?
Yeah, well, I don't think Smash and Warda are working at all. I mean, Anella's had his necklace around his neck the last two tribal councils, and Warda has really been digging into him. And I don't know how that's going to be repaired at the merge. I really do think that Anella's just going to jump back over to the old Zumba tribe, and it seems like unless there's a lot of advantages that are put into play and something happens to flip the alliance, I'm honestly thinking it's going to be a Pagongan at this point because that Vuna tribe is so dysfunctional, whereas the Zumba tribe seemed like a united front through Renier and that majority alliance. But it's not looking good for Wada really going hard at Smash when they need his vote when it comes to the merge because they need that extra number if they're going to get one of the Zumba members out, because at the moment it's looking like they're six former Vuna members and the other are six former Zumbas. Anella sitting in the middle, they need to, at least play nice and make it across that you're buddy with Anella at this point.
There's 12 people left in the game, so it's 6-6. So when Anella goes over to the other tribe, they'll have 6 on original Zumba and 6 on original Vuna going into this one. So they really need Chappies and Warda to come with. And I do think that Tyson and Kiran is smart enough to know that they need Chappies, and they're going to work on that. I just don't know if Chappies is going to move. That's Chappies. Who knows what Chappies is going to do? I don't think Chappies wakes up in the morning knowing what he's going to do. I think he just goes into like he probably does. He's probably a mad scientist, but I do think that he's one of those people that sort of goes where the wind blows them on the day. And then Santoni probably even more so. And you've got to get both of those two to agree to vote with those. So like I'm similar to you guys. I'm very fearful of Tyson and Kiran's place in the game. But the one thing that does give me hope is that Leroux Buta did say before the season that it's going to be a crazy post-merge. So I'm hoping it's not him being Jeff Probst trying to hype a season up, because we know that sometimes can hit and fail. But I do think that Leroux Buta wouldn't have said that unless there's some interesting shenanigans ahead.
Yeah. No, I think there's still possibilities there. You've got, especially like there's certain people in that alliance that might turn on each other in the Zumba originals, like because you've got the girls that are very obviously tight, and you've got other people that might want to break through. Someone like Nicole or Amy might be someone that tries to break the game open. It might not be necessarily on the first one, but you're still looking at the potential of, like, you never know, Renier might feel like he has a better path. And you've sort of seen, like, I mean, Kieran was the one that really pushed the idea of like voting for himself and protecting his entire tribe by sacrificing himself. And that's so valuable. If I'm in a game playing with that, I would want to keep him. If he's done something like that for me, I would be like, all right, like let's see if we can keep this guy around a little bit. That's not going to benefit everyone, but I think for someone who was in that tribal, like it would, and I would consider it. So I think, you've got a 50-50 here. Either it's like insane or mostly Pagongan. Like I think you've got both of them. I think it's like 50-50 in my mind. If I was going to bet, I would say probably lean towards a Pagongan, but it could very easily, depending on how independent people are feeling, go the other way.
I'm so excited to see what's going to happen next week on the merge episode. And it is going to be interesting. Like, we know there's a bottom 4, but we've seen it so many times in Survivor that if a bottom 4 is very strong together, and Nesu, Kiran, Tyson, and Warda, they can actually still blow the game open. It's happened many a times, like if those 4 don't want to betray each other. So I really want to see where that is going to play out for us moving forward. But we're going to get into the last section here, Harry, of the podcast. And what this is our draft picks. So prior to the season, myself and Riley had some draft picks coming into the season, and we had a friendly wager going on that one person will owe the other one a bit of beers if they had less people going into the merge. And Riley, you were very hot on your team here prior to the season. But even with losing my latest player in Kian here, I still go into the merge with 2 players ahead. So you will be helping the New Zealand economy a little bit by ordering some beers for me. We do appreciate it over here in Aotearoa. But overall, very, very exciting preseason. And I want to touch on the players that are still left in the board here, because obviously you've got a few less players there in your tribe at the moment, Riley. But looking at your tribe, I would say in this tribe here, I feel, for me personally, I'm the highest on Tyson being your bet to potentially win the game. And this is just looking off edit, but like Harry said, I could be completely wrong using my Americanized way of looking at an edit. I think Tyson is your front runner. I do like Kiran in the game as well, but I'm fearful that a lot of the strategy, even though I know they're probably working very closely together on what they're doing, Tyson is getting most of the credit in the confessionals and things like that, and getting most of the opportunity to explain his strategy up until this point. So I think that he's your best bet as a person that potentially could win the game in there. Harry, looking at Riley's team, who do you think sort of in that group for you sort of stands out as potential winners or dark horses going into this specific merge phase of the game?
You know what? I'm going to throw out a dark horse right now. I'm going to say Marisha. I'm actually really, really liking the possibility. She's got a lot of connections, but not necessarily in a way that would make her the threat level immediately. I think she's got all the tools you need to win challenges late in the game, so she could make a run there. She seems very likable. I like everything about her. She's got good qualities everywhere, but not to the point where people start targeting her, and that's like the perfect survivor player. So I'm going to say Marisha's my dark horse there.
It's interesting because Marisha is such a physical presence, but you don't really hear people talking about that as being a negative. Like with Chappies, they're like, we probably need to get rid of him at some point. But Marisha, there's been no chat of that up until this point. And it's crazy that her social game must be that strong that people just don't want to get rid of her from a personal perspective and just liking to play with her, I guess, going into the game. Now, going over to my tribe and the people that are still left in the game at this stage, I personally believe that, my preseason winner pick was Anesu, just so you know. So I don't think she's completely out of the game yet. I do think that I see a way for her because she still gets a lot of confessional time. And out of the original Vuna, I think she's potentially the most in the middle of all of them. And she probably have a good amount of bonds now in that tribe that she's going in with. So potentially she can ingratiate herself with the girls in that side, or I don't know how close she is with Ranid, but I think that she's got the social skills to potentially be the person that survives from original Vuna going into the merge. And then the other person here that I'm extremely high on, specifically after this episode, is Ranid. I think that he really is the person at the moment that's in the driver's seat, and potentially it's his game to lose at this point. Ranid, who do you think, Riley, who do you think in this specific team of mine is currently the person to look out for going into the merge phase, and who's your dark horse pick?
Yeah, I certainly think Ranier is the one to watch at the moment. He's in the majority alliance with his alliance with Amy, Nicole, and Marisha. Obviously going to pull in Smash, hopefully, and that might give the majority in the game. So I think Ranier has a lot of good prospects. We're also seeing some personal content as well with what's going on back at home for him, with him expecting another trial. So I think that is a big upside for his edit. In terms of the dark horses, I'm still really high on Amy. I still think Amy could go deep in the game. She seems to have a strong hold of the game. Obviously, we saw that she was a pivotal member of that old Vuna member in the blind sides of both Carla and Paul. So she's clearly someone that's well positioned within the tribe. She seems to have a lot of social capital. She's got Sean in her pocket, it seems. Also got that alliance with Nicole, Marisha, and obviously Ranier as well. But I think she's someone that could be flexible. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if she gets back in cahoots with someone like Wada. So I think she's got, she's got lots of upsides, lots of connections that I can see her going deep in the game.
Plus, Harry, do we see the undercover mafia alliance between the Ranid and Amy playing a big role potentially here after the merge? Because it's something that sort of, I feel like there's a reason we've seen it twice on our screens prior to the merge. Yeah,
potentially. And I think there's a lot of people that still have a lot of upside if they play their cards right towards the end. Like, I don't see them as being locked out of winning. Obviously, you have the big lightning rods. You've got Chappies, you've got Rinier. But maybe it's my Australian Survivor brain, but like I'm looking at people that are just kind of sitting just behind that as being really, really good chances to win. Like I like Amy's chances. I think if she just kind of keeps pushing, like she's been involved in a lot of stuff, and she's trying to push things as well. Had a visit to Immunity Island that didn't go her way, but other than that, has had really good processes for everything. So I'm actually liking, like for a lot of this, my dark horses are the women that I think will really push through, especially post-merge. I think Amy, Marisha, and Anesu all have really good shots at winning the game. All they have to do is time everything out right. Like you just got to wait until a good time, get rid of the other people at the forefront, and then take that win for yourself.
I do agree. I mean, Amy was someone I think I nominated 3 times as my best player of the week already going prior to the merge, because I really valued the amount of strategy she brought to having that, I guess, original Zumba 3 survive that first swap. To me was amazing. It takes a pretty good player to be able to, obviously there was a bit of craziness coming into that tribe, but she did everything right to take advantage of that and to survive that phase in the game where a lesser capable player potentially wouldn't have been able to survive that. So I do agree with you guys on those picks. So as a final here, we're going to go around and nominate who we think has played the best game for this episode alone. So not necessarily who's going to be the person who's going to go the furthest or win the game, but in this episode, who do we think played the best game? And if there is 3 different people, that's fine. We can have a 3-way tie. We have had a 3-way tie once with a guest coming on here when we had Satoni, Amy, and Carla all be the player of the week because we had different people nominated. And Riley, I think I'm going to go over to you first so we give Harry a little bit of time to think. And then Harry, you can go second. And I will finish us off on who we think the player of the week is. Riley, who do you have as your player of the week and why?
I'm actually going to go 2 in a row, I think. I'm going to pick Renier again this week, mainly because the Zumba vote was very cut and dry. We didn't see too much content over there because it really was a very straightforward vote. With Renier, though, we did see him obviously create that alliance with Chappies, which I think is only going to add to his power within the game. Also downplay his threat within the game and making it appear as though he's not a fan and not too aware of how the game works. I think that was a really good move on his part. And we also got to see a lot of positive stuff in the edit with his family connection back home. So I think, a really great episode all around for a year, even though he wasn't tested in going to tribal council. I really liked his performance this episode in seeing that relationship with Chappies and also, he's standing within the tribe.
Okay, so Harry, you've got the second option here, and you don't have to go for the same person. Who do you think has played the best?
It's really, really hard not to say Renier. Like, I mean, he did the puzzle. He's making connections, and you can tell that he continues to work. Even like if he's got a good position already, he's not resting on that. Other than that, it's pretty hard to pick anyone else that's super standout. I mean, you've got other people that are all playing well, and I think a lot of these players are actually playing well. So it's something where you could say quite a few people, but I think Renier is a standout for this episode in particular, even though I think for the most part, everyone is playing a lot of their cards right.
Yeah, so for me, I want to give, Renier, I know, again, I'm not going to nominate you for this spot, but I actually do love you as a player, and I do think that you're playing the best game for the whole season as a whole. But how I want to sort of rank it for me in my personal rankings is I always want to go to who actually dictated the vote and who was involved and where the vote went for this episode. So I am going to give it to Tyson for his second week in a row for being able to get the vote here that he wanted on Keon. I know it was a pretty predictable one at the end, but like I said, I really respect the fact that Tyson and Kiran as well have found a way to work with Santoni, who at times I think, she's a great player, great character for the season. And, could she be that crazy winner we don't expect, because she's had a lot of content, and man, can she go and jump between alliances all the way to the end? But for now, they've found a way to control that nervous energy that she has and sort of get the votes. And potentially, I think that Tyson and Kiran have opened the door to working with Chappies down the line because they haven't gotten rid of Santoni. They've protected her to a certain degree. I think this was a good move for them there. But again, tomato, who knows what's going to happen when we actually get to the merge. It is going to be interesting moving forward. Also, we've got Chris here saying, can't wait for tomorrow night. So since we have you on the podcast at the moment, Harry, it would be absolutely an injustice not to talk about Australian Survivor just for a few minutes here as we get into it. How excited are you for the new season and specifically having it in the Australian Outback?
Yeah, I'm very interested to see how it goes, especially the survival aspects. They're not going to have access to the ocean. They're not going to have access to any coconut or papaya. So we'll see how they go with that. They're probably going to be dying of starvation more so than any other Australian Survivor season. You might start to see a few more similarities pop up between this season and maybe South Africa and US because of that. Whereas like in Fiji, like food is like in reasonable quantity. I'm not going to say that we don't lose weight because definitely did, but there's just that little bit of extra niceness to it, which they're not going to have. It's going to be rice and beans. As for the brains versus brawns, like it's an interesting concept. We'll see how it plays out. I think it really just depends on context of how production actually decides to go with it. If we don't see very many puzzles, I can see the brains tribe potentially getting stomped. But still very exciting. So glad to have it back on. I think we've got 3 episodes this week. One of them might even be a double tomorrow night. So it's very, very exciting.
Wow. Yeah, so Riley and myself will be talking about Australians' brains versus brawns throughout the whole season, and we're very excited about it. We've just did our cast, our draft of that earlier this week on Wednesday. We had a great live crowd, actually, who jumped on. A few of them have been listening to this podcast today as well, and we thank you guys that have been here live with us, watching this podcast with us. So we're very excited about that. We'll be doing 2 recaps. So we'll be doing one on Monday evening at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time to talk about the premiere episode that's hitting us on Sunday, and then we will go to our normal slot, which we will be doing weekly at Wednesday 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time each week. It is 6 p.m. right, Riley? Keep me focused there.
That's right.
100%. I got it. Riley's my person who keeps me on track. So 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time each Wednesday, and we will be talking normally 3 episodes at a time about that. We do have a few potential Australian survivors that we've been talking to. It's been a bit harder to get a hold of some of the Australian survivors that have shown an interest to potentially come on the show and talk about the season with us. And obviously, Harry, not putting any pressure on you, but if you ever wanted to, a couple of weeks down the line after the merge or something like that, do a later recap. We'd love to have you back. It's been great talking to you about Survivor South Africa here as well, and it'd be great to hear your thoughts on that season, the season without beauties, because all Australians are beautiful people in any case.
Yeah.
It's been great talking to you, Riley. Anything you want to plug? I know we just did our international survivor who would do well in the US season on your channel. What else do you have going on at the moment?
Yeah, if you haven't already checked that out, I did a collaboration with Chris, myself, and also Analytical Strategy, another content creator on YouTube, discussing 6 international survivors that would do well in US Survivor. Unfortunately, Harry, we only had 3 Australian survivors to pick from it, and you weren't one of them. But go check out that if you haven't already over on Snuffed. Other than that, I'll be continuing to put out new content. I think we're up to Parvati Shallow, the winner of Survivor Micronesia. I'll be doing a video all on her win, and I'll also be discussing the legacy of Parvati Shallow in the game and looking back at all the Parvati 2.0s that have gone throughout the game and the target that Parvati has set for other players. So yeah, if you haven't already, snuffed my channel right here on YouTube.
Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.